You've tried to keep your composure over the course of this. Kind of reminds me of an old Far Side comic that said the floggings will continue until morale improves. The last one I just coach you on, don't take the bait, because they're going to use that discussion between you and Senator Schiff, as you've suggested before, to raise money. Just sit down in the quiet confidence that you're doing a good job. Real quick, in less than 30 seconds, give me your resume again on why you're qualified for this position.
Thank you, Senator. I served as a public defender and national security prosecutor. I tried over 60 criminal trials to verdict in state and federal court. I served as the lead investigator in the House Intelligence Committee and the counterterrorism expert there, unfolding the Russiagate investigation. I served as the head of counterterrorism for a presidential White House. I served as the deputy director of national intelligence at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, overseeing our 17 intelligence agencies. I served as the chief of staff to the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, overseeing a $2 trillion financial equity flow, and also defending the homeland and providing for our no-fail mission.
We could drill down in details, because I've studied that record, and I think you should be very proud of it. I just did that for the benefit of the liberal media that just keep referring to you as a podcaster, I think, and I appreciate you giving me that resume. It's a good body of work. It's why I supported your nomination so strongly when you were before this committee. Really quickly, too, on the events of last week and the sad death and assassination of Mr. Kirk, I seem to recall that Mr. Zen, I think, was the first person of interest. He was reported to be saying, "I shot him, now shoot me," or something to that effect. Would that have more or less, and your job is to calm the tensions, right? There were people running all over the building. People are afraid over there. Could it be that because you were in possession of some of that information that maybe you did just characterize as getting our man, that maybe that's what led up to it, if those facts are correct?
What led me to that is to eliminate subjects, but also we were in a period with inside of 24 hours where we didn't know who the shooter was.
Well, that's why I asked, because people are forgetting that this man was reported to have been saying, "I shot him, now shoot me." They're also forgetting that he brought in an attorney and said that he'd fabricated the claim to draw attention away from the actual shooter, and he went on to get multiple charges for possessing child pornography and sexual abuse material on his phone. So I'm just saying that it just seems to me that in the moment, maybe you should have used different words, but I can't imagine that the amount of time that we've spent on that subject in the hearing today. But I think it's because they're really worried that they're another punchline to an old joke. Your work, it's working in practice, but it's not working in their theory. They haven't heard you, so it's working in practice, but not in theory. They haven't heard you say multiple times that you've plussed up FBI resources in every state. They haven't heard you when you've talked about year-over-year comparisons for results. I don't care how many people you have at HQ, as long as you keep producing those results and they're good. They need to be sustained. Now, I am a little bit concerned about the deployment of National Guard troops to dangerous cities, but you keep on mentioning something I'm going to go back to in terms of joint task forces. You also did a great job of explaining why you think you should save money and go out and fly out of an airport versus an easy trip across the Potomac to National. I love all of those responses. I'm not going to repeat them here, but I'm worried that if we move in too quickly, let's say to Memphis, I should back up and say I was Speaker of the House in North Carolina. And I would consider it a personal failure on the part of state leadership if they have to call in federal resources to do their job beyond what they do every day. And that's promoting joint task forces. I've seen ATF, DEA, FBI. I've been in the briefing rooms at 3 o'clock in the morning about to go and do 55 no-knock warrants on bad people. You all do that every day, and thank God that you are. It looks like we should plus it up in a few cities. I'd rather use the money to deploy National Guard to just continue to leverage what you're already doing well. And I compliment you, because I've got to believe it's a lot of these joint task forces that have increased the apprehension and charging rates. So thank you for that. But do you agree that at the end of the day, if we're going to have a sustained impact on crime, whether it's Memphis or any other city, that we've really got to enable, empower, and continue to support the men and women on the ground there every single day?
100%.
Thank you. I think that your cost-benefit mind needs to go into, if I'm about to deploy this many National Guardsmen to a city, what does that cost, and what would that look like if we were plowing that cost of deployment into ongoing, I believe, joint task force, which are working very well. They're working well in North Carolina. So I'd like you to look at it. Now I'm going to move on. The Safer Communities Act. Can I get your commitment to get an update? Maybe we could even take a trip out to West Virginia to see how we're doing an extraordinary job of NICS background checks. People are getting them in record time, but we are taking a few guns away from people that probably shouldn't be able to buy it that day. Would you agree with that characterization?
I would love to have you out and anyone else in this day is to West Virginia to see that
I'd like
work.
to bring some of my colleagues to see it's working. We had people on my side of the aisle saying it was going to be awful, it was going to result in mass confiscation of guns. Not true. They were wrong. This bill's making a difference. I also want to talk about the behavioral health and other components in granting. I know in North Carolina things are going well. I want to make sure that that flow is going out there because the tragic events in North Carolina and Charlotte, the stabbing, I spoke with one of the family members yesterday, I think that we have to recognize that we have magistrates that have a revolving door policy, no doubt about that, and they should be held accountable if they're releasing dangerous people. But I also think that some of the problem is that we simply don't have a place to send people, particularly with respect to behavioral health. We have got to continue to, every law enforcement officer I've ever spoken with says, look, I've got law enforcement officers seconded to an emergency room because I've got somebody with no place to send them. I don't have a bed upstairs I can send them to. I don't have a behavioral health facility. We've got to provide more ways to detain people that are a risk to themselves and a risk for the community. And I really do believe the Safer Communities Act is a good framework for doing that. That's only a comment. Section 702 is going to come up in April of next year for renewal. Do you believe it should be eliminated and not reauthorized?
No, sir. It needs to be
Can I
reauthorized.
also get your commitment maybe to come back over and review some of the controls that are in place and other things? So hopefully we won't have the drama leading up to April. We can actually come here and get consensus on why you've got the checks and balances in place and why we should do it. Just remove any chance that we're going to run into that cliff narrative next year. Can I get your commitment on doing that?
You have
Mr.
it, sir.
Patel? Thank you. I want to talk very briefly on, and the chairman's given me a gavel, but I promise not to go over more than 2 minutes. But that's why I chose to be last, so I could have this discussion and actually get to some facts versus agendas and clickbait that we'll almost certainly see going forward. Tell me a little bit about the rationale behind the change in stance in recruiting. I also understand there may be a reduction in the academy timeline. Just give me some thinking about where you are on recruiting, retention, training, et cetera.
Simple. So recruitment is through the roof. We've doubled up month over month our applicants to be 1811s, our federal agents, intel analysts. So the recruitment is going wonderful. What we have to do is figure out a way to get creative because the BFTC timeline is an 18 to 20 week program. And what we've done to address the openings we have for 1811 brick agents is we opened it up to the interagency and said, hey, do you at Secret Service or DEA or ATF want to come over? You guys went through FLETC. You guys were cops or military officers, you're law enforcement. So we created a shortened bridge program of 6 weeks at Quantico that if you want to come over and be an FBI agent, you can do so. There's transfers all the time. We just made it easier. And we're also recruiting police officers who might not have a college degree. But in my opinion, that does not disqualify them from serving our community. So we're welcoming them. It's a rigorous application process. It's just one item. But we are changing the timelines based on the needs of the country, but not jeopardizing quality.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I heard someone almost a throwaway line that you were hiring people without a college degree. Most of them have had basic law enforcement training, all the kinds of certifications. You're talking to somebody who didn't achieve my 4-year degree until I was 37. I'd like to think that I brought some things to the table, and I think that those people, the mere comment, I think is inappropriate for somebody considering this to think that they're a lesser person because they don't have a piece of paper. I wanted to get back to the last thing that I will talk about. I'll follow up with some questions for the record. Thank you, incidentally, for consistently being responsive to any inquiries I've made to you. But on the Kirk shooting, I do believe that Senator Schmitt's numbers are right. There seems to be a disproportionate number of voices on the left that are celebrating the assassination of a CEO or celebrating the assassination of someone, in Mr. Kirk's case, that I disagreed with probably about half of his positions. But I felt like he was a good voice in engaging young people, and that's a start, as long as we can do it civilly. And then I also just went back online because I've hammered on this committee multiple times. I just went online and I found in Pinterest that even today you could order a T-shirt that says ACAB 13.12, which translates to all cops are bastards. Or if you don't like that shirt, you can go get an F the Cop shirt at the same website, on a location on Pinterest. There is clearly a problem with some of the voices of the left, and I'm not necessarily saying any members of Congress, that need to tamp it down. Having said that, within 24 hours of Mr. Kirk's shooting, We had the guy that does the podcast for the War Room and another guy who's denied the Sandy Hook shootings say we're at war. Now, how on earth, and I do believe it's a smaller number, but it's a number that has an influence. How on earth are we de-escalating the situation and with the tensions as high as they were last week with going out and saying we're at war? I'm not asking you to respond to this question. I'm just saying that there are people out here on our side of the aisle that still need to look in the mirror. Even if you agree that it's a lower number, bad is bad no matter how many numbers they are. And that kind of rhetoric and that kind of mobilization makes your job more difficult and puts us in a position where we're not being as productive as you want the FBI and state and local law enforcement to be. I'm finished. I just want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for your concise answers. And I am thoroughly impressed with the fact that you have sat in that chair for over 4 hours without a break. So with that, we're, on behalf of the chair, want to thank you for being here today. And also, I assume, are we leaving the record open for any period of time for 1 week? The record will be open, left open for 1 week so that you may have questions for the record. Mr. Patel, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Meeting's adjourned.